The desperate call. The crystal spires of Etherian Prime sang their death song as plasma fire rained from the darkened sky. Minister Valen pressed her translucent form against the observation deck, watching her world burn beneath the assault of the Skarathi Dominion. 300 years of peace had made the Etherians soft, their military nothing more than ceremonial guards and rescue vessels. They had trusted in diplomacy, in the protection of their allies in the Galactic Concordat. That trust was killing them now. The emergency council chamber buzzed with panic as representatives from the 12 city-states argued over their screens. Their bodies, composed of living energy contained within crystalline shells, flickered with colors of distress. Deep purples and angry reds replacing their usual calm blues and greens. The Skarathi had given them an ultimatum: surrender within the next rotation or face complete annihilation. The Etherians had no weapons capable of piercing Skarathi battle armor, no soldiers trained for warfare. They were artists, philosophers, and scientists. Violence was an abstract concept studied in historical texts, not a skill they possessed. Valen activated the quantum communicator, sending their desperate plea across the void to their supposed protectors. The Altarian Defense Pact had promised military aid in exchange for Etherian technology. The message went out on all diplomatic channels, a cry for help that should have brought swift response. Hours passed. The Skarathi bombardment continued, methodical and merciless. Industrial sectors vaporized. Agricultural domes shattered. Millions of Etherian citizens retreated to the deep shelters, their lifelights dimming with fear. The response from the Altarians came as the sun set behind smoke-filled skies. A brief transmission, cold and calculated. The Altarian High Command regretted to inform that their forces were engaged elsewhere. The risk-to-reward ratio of defending Etherian Prime did not meet their strategic parameters. They wished the Etherians well in their negotiations with the Skarathi. The transmission ended. Valen felt something she had only read about in ancient texts: rage. The emotion burned through her crystalline form, causing her to glow white-hot for a moment before she regained control. In the depths of space, 3 light-years away, a different message was received. The human monitoring station Beta 7 picked up the Etherian distress signal by accident. The quantum frequency had bounced off a neutron star, amplifying and redirecting it into human-controlled space. Lieutenant Sarah Chen read the translation twice, not believing what she was seeing. An entire species facing extinction, a call for help that had been ignored by their own allies. She forwarded the signal up the chain of command without hesitation. Admiral Marcus Thompson stood on the bridge of the UES Persistence, reading the intelligence report. Humans had been spacefaring for only 50 years, keeping to themselves in their small corner of the galaxy. The other species knew of them, had classified Earth as a Class 12 death world, and marked human space as quarantine zone. They called humans Deathworlders, creatures from a planet so hostile that it bred nothing but predators and survivors. The galactic community feared what humans might become if they ever decided to expand beyond their borders. Thompson made a decision that would change galactic history. He ordered the Third Fleet to prepare for immediate deployment. The Etherian Situation Room had descended into chaos when the proximity alarms screamed. More ships dropping out of hyperspace. Valen's heart sank. Had the Skarathi called for reinforcements? The tactical display updated, showing the new arrivals. 5 vessels of unknown configuration. They were massive, built with sharp angles and armor plating that looked like it had been welded from the hulls of defeated enemies. The ships broadcast a simple message on all frequencies in perfect Etherian. "This is Admiral Thompson of the United Earth Navy. We received your distress call. Help is here." The Skarathi Fleet Commander, War Master Kraxus, laughed when his sensors detected the human ships. Only 5 vessels against his armada of 30. He had heard stories of the Deathworlders, but stories were just that, stories. No species that had been in space for such a short time could pose a threat to the Skarathi Dominion, conquerors of 16 systems. He ordered his fleet to eliminate the newcomers quickly, then return to the bombardment of Etherian Prime. What followed defied everything the Skarathi knew about space warfare. The human ships didn't move like vessels built for the void. They moved like predators. Where Skarathi doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and rigid formations, the humans fought like their ships were extensions of their own bodies. They rolled and twisted through space at angles that should have torn their hulls apart, accelerating and decelerating at rates that would liquefy most species. The UES Persistence launched something the Skarathi had never seen: fighters. Small, single-pilot craft that danced between laser fire and delivered precise strikes to critical systems. Captain Maya Rodriguez led Hellhound Squadron through the Skarathi formation, her fighter pulling turns that pushed 12 Gs. Her body, evolved on a world where survival meant endurance, handled the stress without losing consciousness. She painted 3 Skarathi destroyers with targeting lasers, and moments later, railgun slugs from the Persistence tore through their shields like tissue paper. The Skarathi tried to adapt, but they were fighting an enemy that had evolved warfare into an art form through millennia of killing each other before reaching the stars. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, half the Skarathi fleet was debris, and the other half was in full retreat. War Master Kraxus sent a final transmission to Etherian Prime, promising that this was not over, that the full might of the Dominion would return. Admiral Thompson's response was broadcast on all frequencies: "We'll be waiting." The human ships took defensive positions around Etherian Prime, their weapon systems still hot, their crews ready for round 2. Valen stood in stunned silence as the tactical display showed the impossible. The Deathworlders had won. The species everyone feared, the ones quarantined to prevent them from contaminating the peaceful galaxy, had answered a stranger's call for help and defeated an enemy the Etherians couldn't even scratch. Her assistant approached, colors swirling with confusion and hope. Minister Valen could not explain why the humans had come. They had no alliance, no trade agreements, nothing to gain from protecting Etherian Prime. The human admiral requested permission to send a diplomatic team to the surface. Valen agreed, though her council worried about what the Deathworlders might want in return for their aid. The shuttle that descended was scarred and patched, looking like it had seen 100 battles. The beings that emerged wore environmental suits, but Valen could see their faces through the visors. They looked tired but determined. Admiral Thompson himself led the delegation, removing his helmet despite the Etherian atmosphere being slightly toxic to humans. The meeting took place in what remained of the Grand Assembly. Thompson listened as Valen explained their situation, how their allies had abandoned them, how they had no means to defend themselves. When she finished, she asked the question that burned in every Etherian mind. Why had the humans come? Thompson's answer was simple and shocking. Because someone needed help and humans had the ability to provide it. No other reason was necessary. The concept was so alien to galactic politics that Valen had to ask him to repeat it. As the first day ended, human medical teams deployed to help with wounded civilians. Human engineers began repairing damaged infrastructure. Human soldiers stood guard at shelter entrances, protecting beings they had never met before this day. The Etherians watched in amazement as the Deathworlders worked. They were efficient and brutal when fighting, but gentle when helping. One human soldier was seen carrying Etherian younglings to safety, his combat armor scarred from battle but his hands careful and soft. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were indeed Deathworlders. They came from a planet that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. They had evolved as persistence predators, capable of enduring what would destroy other species. But they had also evolved something else: pack bonding that extended beyond their own species, empathy that crossed the void between stars, and a stubborn refusal to let others suffer when they had the power to help. The Etherians had called for their allies and received no answer. They had called into the void and found something better: humans. When predators protect the Skarathi returned at dawn, just as Admiral Thompson had predicted. War Master Kraxus had brought the entire Second Armada, 70 ships strong, including 2 Planet Killer-class dreadnoughts. He broadcast his demands across all channels. The humans would leave immediately or they would share the Etherians' fate. Thompson's response was to launch all fighters and power up something the Etherian sensors couldn't identify: massive magnetic coils along the human ship's spines. Commander David Park stood in the cargo bay of the UES Defiance, addressing his Marines. They were about to attempt something insane even by human standards: a combat drop directly onto Etherian Prime's surface, while the space battle raged overhead. The Skarathi had landed occupation forces during the night, taking control of 3 major cities. The Etherian civilians trapped there needed evacuation, and the Marines were going to provide it. Park's speech was short, Protect the innocent, eliminate the threats, and everyone comes home. The drop pods launched like missiles, burning through the atmosphere as the space battle erupted above them. Inside each pod, a human warrior sat in powered armor that turned them into walking tanks. The suits were designed on Earth, where humans had learned that sometimes the best defense was to become something so dangerous that nothing wanted to fight you. The Skarathi ground forces, busy corralling Etherian civilians, didn't notice the meteors falling toward their positions until it was too late. Sergeant Lisa Martinez was first out of her pod, landing in the central plaza of Lumenis City. The Skarathi warriors turned their weapons on her, confident that their plasma rifles would cut through any armor. They were wrong. The powered armor absorbed the hits, dispersing the energy across its surface. Martinez moved with mechanical precision, her suit's strength allowing her to throw 1,000-pound concrete barriers like toys. She carved a path through the Skarathi line, not to attack but to reach the trapped civilians. The Etherian citizens cowered as the human warrior approached, unsure if they had traded one conqueror for another. Martinez retracted her helmet, revealing a scarred but kind face. She spoke in broken Etherian, learned during the flight here. Friends, come. Safety. An Etherian elder, his crystalline form flickering with age, stepped forward. Martinez gently picked him up, her powered hands capable of crushing stone but holding him like glass. Other Marines secured the perimeter, their weapons creating a safe corridor for evacuation. Above the planet, the space battle had become a lesson in human military doctrine. The Skarathi fought in traditional formations, their dreadnoughts protected by screens of smaller vessels. The humans treated space like a three-dimensional ocean, using tactics evolved from submarine warfare. They went silent, shutting down all non-essential systems, becoming holes in space that the Skarathi sensors struggled to track. Then they struck from unexpected angles, using mass drivers that fired projectiles at percentages of light speed. The weapon the Etherians couldn't identify revealed itself when the first Skarathi dreadnought moved into range. It was called a Gauss cannon, a magnetic accelerator that could launch a tungsten rod with enough kinetic energy to crack a small moon. The round punched through the dreadnought's shields, its armor, and its reactor core in less than a second. The massive ship simply ceased to exist, transformed into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The second dreadnought tried to retreat, but found human ships had maneuvered behind it during the chaos. On the ground, the Skarathi occupation force discovered why humans were classified as Deathworlders. The Marines didn't just fight, they hunted. They used tactics refined through millions of years of evolution, moving in coordinated packs using persistence that outlasted Skarathi endurance. When Skarathi warriors took defensive positions, humans simply waited them out, rotating fresh troops while the enemy tired. When the Skarathi tried to use Etherian civilians as shields, human snipers took impossible shots, their steadiness and precision beyond what the Skarathi thought possible. Captain Rodriguez led a strike team into the occupied government district. The Skarathi had fortified the building, turning it into a fortress. Rodriguez studied the structure for exactly 30 seconds before ordering her team to ignore the front entrance entirely. They scaled the building's exterior, their enhanced muscles and grip strength allowing them to climb the smooth crystal walls. They entered through the roof, moving down through the structure like water finding cracks. The Skarathi commanders inside never saw them coming. The battle turned when human reinforcements arrived, not military ships but civilian vessels. Cargo haulers, mining ships, and private yachts, all armed with whatever weapons their crews could bolt on. The galaxy would later call it the Volunteer Fleet, but the humans just called it Tuesday. When someone put out a call for help, humans answered. It didn't matter that they weren't soldiers. They were humans, and humans protected those who couldn't protect themselves. War Master Craxus watched his forces crumble and made a desperate decision. He ordered his remaining ships to target Etherian population centers directly, believing the humans would have to choose between pursuing his fleet and protecting civilians. He had studied human history just enough to be dangerous but not enough to be wise. He didn't understand that threatening innocence didn't make humans hesitate, it made them angry. And an angry human was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Admiral Thompson's order was broadcast to every human ship, every Marine on the ground. Weapons free. Protect the Etherians at all costs. What followed would be remembered in galactic history as the Fury of Sol. Human ships stopped holding back, revealing weapons and tactics they had kept in reserve. Antimatter missiles, relativistic kill vehicles, and something called a nova bomb that turned a Skarathi cruiser into a miniature star for exactly 3 seconds before it collapsed into nothing. The Marines on the ground went from protective to predatory. They stopped simply defeating Skarathi warriors and began hunting them through the streets. The powered armor allowed them to run at speeds that broke the sound barrier, to punch through walls, to survive direct hits from heavy weapons. One Marine, Private Chen, held a bridge against 40 Skarathi warriors for 6 hours, using nothing but determination and a weapon that humans called a shotgun, a primitive kinetic weapon that the Skarathi had no defense against. The end came when War Master Kraxus himself was captured. His command ship had been disabled by a precisely placed railgun shot, and human Marines had boarded it. They found him in his command throne, still trying to order forces that no longer existed. Captain Park approached him, removing his helmet to look the War Master in the eyes. Kraxus expected threats, torture, and demands for surrender. Instead, Park simply said, "You lost the moment you threatened civilians. We protect the innocent, always." The surrender was broadcast across the galaxy. The mighty Skarathi Dominion, conquerors of 16 systems, had been broken by 5 human ships and a volunteer fleet. But what shocked the galactic community more was what happened next. The humans didn't claim Etherian Prime as a conquest. They didn't demand resources or technology. They helped rebuild. Human engineers worked alongside Etherian scientists to repair the damage. Human medical teams treated wounded Skarathi prisoners with the same care they gave to Etherian civilians. Minister Valen met with Admiral Thompson one last time before the human fleet departed. She asked him what humanity wanted from the galaxy, what their price was for this intervention. Thompson's answer would echo through diplomatic channels for generations. "We don't want to conquer. We don't want to rule. We just want to help." When someone calls out in the dark, humans answer, "That's who we are." He paused, then added, "But let the galaxy know, we protect our friends. And after today, the Etherians are our friends." The transformation was remarkable. The Etherians, once devoted to pure pacifism, began training with human advisors, not to become warriors but to become protectors. They developed defensive technologies that complemented human offensive capabilities. The alliance between the Etherians and humans became the foundation of something new in the galaxy, the coalition of mutual aid. Species that had been abandoned by traditional alliances found new hope. The Skarathi Dominion never recovered from their defeat. Other species they had conquered rose up, inspired by the human example. The galaxy learned that humans were indeed Deathworlders, but not in the way they feared. Humans were dangerous not because they came from a hostile world, but because they had survived it through cooperation, determination, and an absolute refusal to abandon those in need. They brought those values to the stars. As the human fleet departed Etherian space, they left behind more than just repaired cities and defensive stations. They left behind a new understanding. The galaxy had tried to quarantine humanity, fearing what the Deathworlders might bring. They discovered that humans brought something the galaxy desperately needed: hope. Hope that when darkness came, when allies failed, when all seemed lost, there would be someone willing to stand up and say, "We'll help." The story spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The Deathworlders had answered a call meant for others. They had fought without hesitation, protected without question, and left without demands. The quarantine on human space was quietly lifted. Trade routes opened, diplomatic channels established. The galaxy was ready to learn what the Etherians had discovered. Humans were terrifying in battle, but they fought for the right reasons. Years later, when young Etherians asked why humans had come to their aid, the elders would show them the recordings of that day. They would point to the human Marines carrying younglings to safety, to the volunteer fleet that came without being asked, to Admiral Thompson standing with Minister Valen as equals. The lesson was simple but profound. Humans were proof that strength without compassion was mere brutality, but strength with compassion could save the universe.